I did not expect my video to Hank Green about his error-riddled video about physics and knitting to go quite so viral, but as long as we're on the subject, I am never going to waste an opportunity to talk about fiber arts. The focus of Hank's video was how physicists and engineers have figured out that knitting is useful for them. And I addressed all of the issues I found, or not all of them, but a number of the issues I found with his video in my previous video, so go back and watch that. But I also think, gosh, I really wish Hank had consulted experts in this field, that he'd talked to knitters, that he'd talked to fiber artists, that he'd talked to textile experts. Because when we're talking about the forces at play in a knitted garment, he really missed a whole layer of complexity that goes into understanding the behavior of knitted textiles and how you can use the behavior, the characteristics of various knitted pieces to your advantage. Because you see, it's not just the combination of knit and purl stitches, the torque in those interconnected loops that matters when you are trying to understand the physics of knitting. Now, this is what Hank had to say about it.
Knitters figured out how to make all sorts of patterns through trial and error. How it all works was mostly a mystery. I mean, why do certain patterns of knits and purls create folds and zigzags or rolls? The answer, of course, lies in physics. Researchers have figured out that the way a fabric naturally curves has to do with a sort of force field created by all the knots in it. Now, normally, we think of force fields in the context of things like gravity or magnets. Like here, all of these iron filings show you the shape of a magnet's force field, essentially the area where the magnet's force can be felt. And in a way, knitted yarn creates its own sort of force field. This happens because wherever two pieces of yarn cross each other, each one wants to be in the same spot, but they cannot be. So one strand gets pushed down while the other gets pushed up. And each section of the yarn naturally resists being bent and stretched around the other, so the strand that's being pushed down reacts with a small upward force, and the strand that's being pushed up creates a downward force. Ultimately, the yarn settles into the position where it's under the least amount of tension. In other words, it relaxes into the lowest possible energy.
Okay, because I can't help myself, a couple of things there. I don't think the physics of knitting, the forces that are at play, were actually a mystery to knitters. I think knitters have understood those forces extremely well, and we have learned how to harness them. It's just academia that is figuring it out for the first time. And also because I can't help myself, Hank, I've got to correct you again. Knitting is not a series of knots. You said that multiple times in your video. Knitting is interconnected loops. That actually really matters when you're talking about the forces at play. Now, I am not a physicist by training. I am a biologist by training. But I have been a knitter for 27 years, and I've been a spinner for 18 years. Now, I don't raise sheep or alpaca, but I do take raw fleeces that I get from friends of mine who do have sheep and alpaca, and I skirt and process that fiber. I spin it into yarn, and then I knit with it, or I weave with it, because I also have a jack loom upstairs. I first learned to spin yarn on a drop spindle. Again, in your video, you repeatedly referenced the material that knitters use as string. It's not, it's yarn. Those are two very different things. By the way, drop spindle spinning is a craft, a skill that is done frequently by men around the world, often shepherds. It's an entirely portable way of making yarn. Now, I also have 3 spinning wheels. And the reason that I bring this up is because when we're talking about the physics of knitting, the way the yarn is constructed actually really matters when it comes to the behavior of the yarn that you knit into a textile. And even more than that, right? Before you get to knitting, before you get to spinning the yarn, you actually have to go back to the breed of sheep that you are using. The staple length and the crimp matters significantly. Ask any knitter the difference between knitting a garment where the yarn is merino wool versus Blueface Leicester or, Jacob sheep. The loft, the bounciness, the way the garment knits up in the end is dramatically different depending on what breed of sheep you use. Right? For centuries and centuries, shepherds have bred sheep for particular wool characteristics. But we can and should go back even further in the selection process, because obviously sheep wool is not the only fiber that you can spin into yarn and then knit. Any knitter who has made a garment with alpaca will tell you alpaca fiber does not behave anything like wool fiber. Yes, it's soft and drapey and luxurious, but that drape turns into sag very quickly. It doesn't have the kind of elasticity that sheep wool does. Because of the crimp, the composition of the fiber itself, it behaves very differently when spun into yarn, and that means you need to use it for different purposes or have different expectations of it. I can't be the only person who has knitted a sweater out of alpaca only to be frustrated that several months in the sleeves have sagged and they're now way too long. The more you wear it, the more alpaca fiber relaxes, but wool has much greater memory. I think after this clip that I showed, Hank talks about how knitted garments tend to spring back and remember their shape. but that's not true for every fiber. It is true for a number of breeds of sheep wool. And we could go down the list of other animal-based fibers that have historically been used for spinning into yarn and then knitted up into garments. Yak, camel, kiviot, silk. Heck, I spin and knit the hair of my standard poodle. There's a whole book called Knitting with Dog Hair. It'll teach you how to process and spin and knit the fiber that comes from your beloved pet. You can also do it with cat hair. And then we can and should get into vegetable-based fibers like flax, which is turned into linen, which is what I'm wearing today, and then also cotton. Those yarns and subsequent textiles behave very differently. And then, of course, we can get into synthetic fibers. I don't know. I know the video had a lot of errors and I know that it really oversimplified things, but gosh, there's such a richness here when you look at the history of especially textiles that are made from wool. The depth and breadth of wisdom, the knowledge and relationships between farmers who are breeding the sheep for specific characteristics that then the spinners want and ultimately also the weavers and knitters want. You have this rich, interconnected fiber economy when it comes to knitters, not just historically, but still today. And this video of Hank's really presented it like, oh, it's all a mystery until physicists got their hands on this. We didn't really know how these forces worked and we didn't really know what's going on. And even now, physicists don't really understand. But I'm telling you, sheep farmers, spinners, weavers, knitters, we have understood this for centuries. That is why we have made sure to breed specific characteristics into sheep wool. And we know how to treat that wool every step of the way to get the desired characteristics in the final garment. As a spinner, I understand if I spin my yarn with a Z twist or an S twist, I will get different behavior in the finished yarn. That will then be exhibited in the finished knitted product. I understand the way I ply a yarn, whether I decide at the end to do what's called setting the twist. And even going back before that, if I have my raw fiber, what do I do with it? Am I going to spin it raw, right? Am I going to spin it straight from the fleece? Am I going to scour it and process it? And then am I going to use my wool combs or am I going to use a carder? Am I going to spin it worsted or am I going to spin it woolen? All of these dramatically impact the behavior of the finished textile. I would love to see Hank bring some sheep farmers, bring some textile experts, bring some highly experienced spinners and knitters onto his show and talk to them about this. Have a really good deep dive because I think that there is a real good science lesson for everybody. And it isn't some new discovery that academia, made in 2024. It's something that the textile community has known for centuries and centuries and has been harnessing in order to get the products that they want, in order to produce the kind of textiles that they desire. I'm not mad at Hank at all. I just think, oh gosh, and I realize probably nobody will watch this video, especially on my YouTube. This won't get views, but this is just such a passion for me. Sustainable fashion is absolutely one of my core passions, talking about natural fiber clothing and the benefits of natural fiber clothing, not just for the environment, but also for our bodies. I find wool endlessly fascinating. I never get tired of talking about wool. I never get tired of trying new breeds of sheep to spin with, to knit with, to weave with. I wish I knew more about this subject. I have not even begun to plumb the depths of this subject. And gosh, I wish people with huge platforms like Hank would start to plumb those depths as well and share them with his audience. I'm not mad that that video was so full of errors. I'm not happy with the amount of kind of elitism and misogyny that were imbued in every part of the video, but I do think that good things can come out of it. The fact that so many knitters are talking to people that they know who are non-knitters about it, yes, awesome. The fact that it opens the door to have more conversations about the undervalued expertise and skill of women throughout history when it comes to fiber arts and textiles, I think that's a real bonus. Right, we can expand to so many other topics from this. Sustainable fashion, the importance of preserving heritage breeds of sheep, the importance of handwork for individuals and for our society. The elitism in academia and the misogyny in our society, pretending that the labor skills and expertise of women throughout history are completely invisible, diminishing the contributions of women and the way that we shape society and the economy. I think those are good conversations to have. So I'm not mad about that video, and I definitely will take any opportunity to nerd out on fiber arts.